Hampton County 911 was an emergency.
On Salcahatchee Road.
Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay?
2 300 blackout AR-style rifles.
This morning, Alec Murdaugh is again under arrest.
On June 7, 2021, at 10:07 p.m., attorney Alec Murdaugh would call 911 and tell dispatch that he had discovered the bodies of his wife and son. Both were said to have been shot badly. When officers responded to the call, they could see pools of blood as well as brain matter everywhere. Alec would come to deny any involvement in the deaths of his family. However, due to his many financial crimes coming to light, many people believe the killings could have been a way to buy time and shift focus from himself. Alec Murdaugh is a 54-year-old attorney from Hampton, South Carolina, who comes from a highly influential legal family. Murdaugh was the 8th in a long line of prosecutors dating back to the first elected official over 100 years ago. On the outside, the Murdaugh family seemed to be successful and upstanding people. However, they had a reputation for cheating the system and always getting themselves out of trouble. Due to being so influential in the county, the long line of Murdaughs were allowed to run their own legal practice as well as work as prosecutors, which is highly unusual. The family business specialized in personal jury litigation, which refers to when one person suffers harm from an accident or injury and someone else might be legally responsible for the harm. As a result, the Murdaughs were very wealthy. Alec attended law school at the University of South Carolina and graduated in 1994. Alec allegedly secretly used opioids for years as a result of an oxycodone addiction, which he had been struggling with right up until the murders of his family. Alec met his future wife Maggie at the university. Margaret Kennedy Murdaugh, formerly Brandsetter, was the granddaughter of a hairdresser from rural Kentucky who grew up to marry one of South Carolina's richest men. She was a former track runner in high school and sorority member at the university. Maggie was known for her heart of pure generosity and was allegedly very close to her parents. Alec and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard and Paul. Maggie was known to be very overindulgent with them. However, according to a woman named Bubba Mixon, whose son attended school with Richard, Maggie was an old school mother and homemaker, and she lived for her kids. Richard Alexander Murdaugh Jr., also known as Buster, now 26, is the surviving son of Alec and Maggie and was apparently a much more easygoing and well-adjusted person than his brother Paul when they were growing up. Paul Terry Murdaugh was known to be a handful, even as a little boy, and he did not take authority well, according to a family member. He had a reputation as a cocky and privileged rich kid who enjoyed hunting and underage drinking. However, he also had an abundance of friends and was apparently always eager to lend a hand to any of them that needed help. The lives of the Murdaugh family were not as easy as they seemed to be on the outside. Every wealthy and influential family inevitably has their difficulties behind closed doors, and the Murdaughs were no different. In February of 2018, the Murdaughs' housekeeper of more than 20 years, Gloria Satterfield, allegedly tripped over one of the family's dogs and hit her head on the stairs. She later died in the hospital. Satterfield's death was listed as natural on her death certificate. However, according to a coroner, it should have instead been listed as accidental. It would later come out in October of 2021 during the investigation of the Murdaugh murders that authorities were opening a criminal investigation into Gloria Satterfield's death as well as the handling over her estate. Satterfield's body was even exhumed as part of the investigation. Satterfield's sons alleged that Murdaugh had strongly advised that they hire a lawyer so that they could sue his insurer for compensation. This lawyer would end up being a man by the name of Corey Fleming, who, unbeknownst to the Satterfield sons, was a longtime friend of Murdaugh. Following the legal process, a settlement of $500,000 was reached. However, Satterfield's sons say they never actually received a cent of that money. In addition, another $4.3 million was made from the suing process of Murdaugh's insurance agency that Satterfield's sons also did not know about. It was discovered that Fleming had instead sent the money to a new bank account, which unsurprisingly belonged to Murdaugh. Both Murdaugh and Fleming were eventually charged following the investigation, as was former banker Russell Lafayette, who allegedly participated in the scheme. In June 2022, Murdaugh was officially charged with 2 counts of obtaining property by false pretense and finally admitted a confession of judgment that he owed Satterfield's sons the $4.3 million. A year after Satterfield's death and 2 years before the murders, on February 24, 2019, Paul Murdaugh was out underage drinking with his friends. All had been drinking heavily and were joyriding in Alec Murdaugh's speedboat when around 2:20 a.m. they crashed at high speed into a pylon of Arches Creek Bridge. Allegedly, some of the group had started to argue with Paul because he was driving the boat in circles and kept leaving the steering wheel to fight them. Investigators would later note the onboard Garmin GPS showed the speed of the boat had increased. Upon impact, 19-year-old Mallory Beach was ejected from the boat, and one of the friends then called 911. Allegedly, when help arrived, Paul was seen smiling as he got off the boat. In the hospital, several of the group were treated for their injuries. According to a nurse, Paul was highly intoxicated and uncooperative with staff, telling detectives Paul was one of the most arrogant teenagers to come through the emergency room. After completing blood tests on Paul, it was revealed that his blood alcohol content was 0.24, 3 times the legal limit. Alec Murdaugh arrived at the hospital and was actually seen going from room to room trying to talk to the survivors. A security guard also reported that he overheard him on the phone saying, "She's gone, don't worry." Investigators and volunteers would end up spending 8 days searching for Mallory. She was eventually discovered 5 miles from the crash scene. On the 18th of April 2019, Paul Murdaugh was indicted and charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence. In May 2019, Paul pleaded not guilty in court, the same court where his grandfather's portrait hung on the wall. The Murdaughs tried to insist that it wasn't Paul, but another one of the friends that was driving the boat at the time of the accident. He was released on $50,000 recognizance bond, which is a promise entered into and recorded before the court as a form of penalty. It is a promise made by an offender to appear in court, pay a certain amount of money, keep the peace, and be of good behavior for a specific period. Following this, the family of Mallory filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Murdaughs. The day of the murders was June 7, 2021. Alec allegedly called Maggie and asked her to come to the hunting lodge they owned in Islington so they could go together to see Alec's father. His father was 81-year-old Randolph III and was terminally ill. He died at Savannah Hospital a few days after the murders. At the time, Maggie reportedly spent most of her time living at their beach home in Modesto due to their alleged marital problems. Maggie had also apparently spoken with a divorce attorney in the months before her death, and others have said that their marriage appeared to be strained. However, this information has been disputed by Alec and his attorney. In this clip of Alec in the police car following his 911 call, he can be heard saying that he had a wonderful relationship with Maggie.
How about yours and Maggie's?
Wonderful. I mean, I'm sure we had little things here and there, but we had a wonderful marriage, wonderful relationship.
Following the call, Maggie allegedly texted her friend saying that Alec sounded fishy and that he was up to something. Detectives reported that around 9 p.m. that night, both Maggie and Paul were murdered near the dog kennels at their lodge. Both had been shot multiple times, but with different weapons. Maggie was shot with a rifle and had a gunshot wound to her leg, abdomen, and head, according to Creighton Waters, prosecutor for the court case. Paul was killed with a shotgun loaded with a 12-gauge buckshot loads, with wounds in his chest, shoulder, and head that apparently caused devastating damage. At this time, Alec has said he was with his father, Randolph, and it was only when he arrived home around 10 p.m. that he discovered their bodies. In the 911 call, Alec can be heard saying,
My wife and got family. Okay, you said 40 or 47 more.
On the 3rd of September, Alec announced he would be resigning from his law firm, the same law firm that his great-grandfather had founded. The company, Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltzra, and Dietrich, PMPED, announced that there would be an investigation into their company after allegedly discovering that Alec had misused its money. A forensic account firm was hired to conduct the investigation, and prosecutors have said that he stole more than $8.5 million from his law firm and clients who had suffered accidents, both living and dead. The very next day, on September 4th, Alec had pulled over on a rural road because he had a flat tire. He was shot in the head by a passerby. The bullet only grazed him and he survived, but this incident fueled suspicion that the Murdaughs were being targeted as a result of the death of Mallory Beach, until Alex himself was arrested.
Hampton County 911 was your emergency.
On Salkehatchie Road.
Okay, what's the address on Salkehatchie Road?
I'm by the church.
What church?
It was discovered that Murdaugh had actually orchestrated the entire plot so that his remaining son Buster could get his $10 million life insurance payout. The alleged passerby was actually a distant cousin and former client of Alex named Curtis Eddie Smith. Smith was arrested and charged with assisted suicide, assault and battery, and insurance fraud. He's also facing additional charges of conspiracy, money laundering, forgery, and drug offenses. Following this, Alec was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. In July 2022, Alec was officially arrested for the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. A Colleton County grand jury issued an indictment charging him with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon. In October 2022, there was a pretrial hearing, and the prosecution stated they had obtained a video from Paul's mobile phone showing him talking with both Alec and Maggie near the kennels at 8:44 p.m.
Get back. Get back. Quit, Cash. Come on. Quit. It's okay. Come here. It's not bad. Come here, Cash. Come here. Hold still. Cash.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth.
Bubba.
Hey, Bubba.
It's a guinea.
This is a chicken.
Come here, Bubba.
Come here, Cash.
Come here, Bubba.
Cash. Quit.
That was very shortly before his and Maggie's phones stopped all activity. This information was also repeated in the opening statement for the prosecution on January 25th, 2023.
And on that video, and you'll see that video, and you'll hear from witnesses that identify Paul's voice, Maggie's voice, and Alec's voice.
However, this contradicts a claim made by one of Alec's defense attorneys in the HBO Max documentary about the killings, Low Country, The Murdaugh Dynasty. In the documentary, the attorney alleged that Alec had been napping and hadn't seen his wife or son in the moments prior to leaving the lodge. The trial proceedings have only just begun, but so far the prosecution has maintained the angle that Alec committing the murders was a ploy to distract attention from his financial crimes. It's alleged that these thefts might have been about to finally come to light, either through the Mallory Beach lawsuit or his possible divorce lawsuit. South Carolina's Chief Prosecutor Creighton Waters claimed that there is crucial evidence found in Murdaugh's and the victim's phone records that can place him at the scene at the time of the murders, and suggested he may have been trying to come up with an alibi in the hours after. Waters said Murdaugh, Maggie, and Paul were all known as prolific cell phone users.
Particularly Alec and Paul, but also Maggie, were prolific cell phone users, to the point where Paul's friends even had a nickname for him.
Alec's defense lawyer Dick Harpootlian has said that Alec has an alibi for the time of the murders. He told the court that Maggie and Paul were alive when Alec left the property shortly after 9 p.m. to drive to his mother's home. Harpootlian argued that it is much more likely that there were two shooters, neither of which were Murdaugh. That would explain two separate guns being used. Another piece of evidence that Alec's lawyer addressed is that no bloody clothes were ever recovered. Alec wore a white shirt on the night of the murders. In police body camera footage, it can be seen his shirt is clean. The shirt has been described as a key piece of evidence that was destroyed by the state before the defense could forensically test the shirt themselves. Alec's stance is that he believes the killer or killers are still at large and wants the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division to go look for the real killers. If convicted of the charges, which total more than 80 counts, Murdaugh faces 30 years in prison. His defense attorneys maintain that the prosecutors have no concrete evidence or motive tying Murdaugh to the murders. The 1,700-acre Islington hunting lodge where the murders took place is now for sale for $3.9 million. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next time.